Hello guys, so today we're going to look at the seventh index law, which is also the last index law that we're going to see. Okay, so in particular today we would like to go through a couple of key points. First, we'll talk about what is a reciprocal. Okay, some of you may have heard about this word before, but if you haven't, that's fine, we'll go through. And we'll talk about the seventh index law, which focuses on the negative index. We're going to learn how to turn a negative index into a positive one and vice versa, turning a positive index into a negative one. Okay, so a quick recap, the reciprocal of a number. Okay, so I hope you have done this in year 7 when you're doing the fractions. Now, but if you haven't done that, the reciprocal of a number is simply say 1 divided by that number or 1 over that number. So for example, if we want to find a reciprocal of 10, we just simply need to say it's 1 divided by 10. And if we do that, we know it's 0.1. Okay, and if we want to find the reciprocal of, for example, 0.2, we just basically need to do 1 divided by 0.2. Okay, remember the fraction means divide by, so the fraction line here means divide. Okay, so 1 divided by 0.2, if you put that in the calculator, you know the final result is 5. So this is how we use the idea of reciprocal. In fact, when we are doing the 7 index law, you're going to keep reusing this word. So a negative index is basically a reciprocal of the positive index. So what does that mean? Okay, that basically means if we have a number a, okay, it has a negative index, -1. So it's basically the reciprocal, so 1 divided by a. Now, of course, we should say a to the power of 1, but when we say a to the power of 1, it's just the same as a, so we can simplify to this notion. Okay? So a to the power of -1 is just 1 over a. Now another way to see that is when we have a to the power of -n. Okay, remember the negative index, there's a negative here, is the reciprocal of the positive one. So we remove the negative and put that below the fraction mark to make it the denominator. So 1 over a to the power of n. Now in this way, we're removing that n, the negative sign before n. Okay, now we're going to look at how do we apply that. Now, first of all, let's just bear in mind the rule is a to the power of -n is 1 divided by a to the power of n. So, for example, if we have 7 to the power of -2, our base in this case is 7 and the power is 2. We remove the negative sign and make it a reciprocal, means we put 1 on top of the fraction mark. So that will give us 1 divided by 49, or well, if we want to put in the calculator, we get 0.02-ish. But that's fine to keep it just like a fraction. Okay, so if we want to do it on the algebra way, not just a number, we can do that on x and y's or other letters. So if we have, for example, x and y in a bracket to the power of 2, sorry, -2. So when we see the negative, we change that negative to a longer line, which is the fraction line. On top, we always have 1. At the bottom, we keep everything else the same apart from that negative sign. So x and y bracket, we gotta keep everything else the same apart from that negative. So change the -2 to a +2. Okay, so the next bit. That's probably the previous lessons. I hope you still remember this. When we square the whole thing, what we need to do is just to bring the square into each item. So x squared times y squared. So just bring the 2 onto each of them and we can open the brackets. Okay. Now, let's just talking about the other way. So we can also turn a positive index into a negative one. So if we reverse this formula, remember we're just saying a to the power of -n is equal to 1 over a to the power of n. So whenever we see a fraction, okay, whenever we see a fraction that has a to the power of n on the denominator, for example, here we have 4 to the power of 5. Okay, and what we can do is we can say we can bring this up. Okay, we can remove the fraction. Now, the only thing we need to do is to change the index 5 to a negative number, in this case, negative 5. And that's pretty much it. Now, some people prefer the fraction because when we have positive indexes, making it a bit easier to do on the calculator. Well, other people may prefer the negative index because, after all, we only need to write three things. 4, negative 5 is much easier to read than a fraction. It's your preference. So some question may ask you to practice skills to convert from a positive to a negative index or vice versa from negative to a positive. You need to understand how to do that. Now let's keep going. Two more examples. Okay, you can pause here and try yourself and check your answers with me when you're ready. Okay, so I'm going to go through these two questions with you. Okay, so the first one, when it says 1 over a to the power of 4, it's a reciprocal. We see it's 1 over something. So we can put that as, okay, remove that 1 over. Okay, we just keep a, and then we keep the 4. And now this time, remember to put a negative sign before that index. So it's a to the power of negative 4. Okay, now the same way goes in the last one. Okay, it's a reciprocal as well. So now this one is a bit tricky. So because it comes with x and y, so we can treat this one as a bit extension. So what we need to do is we need to treat x and y separately. So when we have 1 over x to the power of 4, we have x to the power of 4. Remember, we got to put a negative sign there. And also we have y to the power of 2. Now remember to put in the negative there as well. So you need to make sure that you put the negative on each single one of them. Okay? So if we just do 4 in the power of 2, 4 and, x in the power of negative 4 and y in the power of 2, that is wrong, unfortunately. We got to put a negative on each of them. Now the reasons for that, if we break it up, okay, we can see how do we figure this out. So we could probably do this. So 1 over this whole thing can be divided into two things. 1 over x over 4 times 1 over y squared. Okay, so the first one can be put into x to the power of negative 4, whereas the second one can put as y to the power of negative 2, so which gives us the final conclusion there. Okay, so when we have more than one prenumerals means letters like x, y, a, b, c. So when we have more than one prenumerals, okay, we gotta keep the negative index for each of them. Okay, now one last thing, which is sort of the extension to this. Okay, so if we have, for example, 1 over x to the power of negative 2. I know it looks messy, okay, and we can simplify that. The way we do that is we just need to bring this whole thing up. So x to the power of negative 2, we bring it up first. And then we got to change the index to the negative. So the negative 2 times negative will become a positive 2. So we actually have an x squared from this calculation. So this is a very special case. This is a very special case. So when we have 1 over a negative index, we can actually simplify that by bringing it up and change it back to the positive. Remember, a negative number times a negative number will give us a positive. Now, quick recap on these four things. So first of all, reciprocal means 1 divided by that number. Okay, so it means 1 divided by that number. Okay, and then the seventh index law basically suggests that if we have a negative index, we just need to put it at it's 1 over and a positive 1. And vice versa, if we have a fraction 1 over some sort of index, when we bring it up, we're going to put a negative sign back. Okay, so this will help us to figure out how to turn a negative index into a positive and how to turn a positive index into the negative. Okay, I hope you are finding this lesson useful, and I hope to see you in the next class.